I'm Matt Harris, and you're listening to Gospel Tangents.
Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. We're a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, a collective of independent, interesting podcasts who promote thoughtful, respectful, and engaging inquiry and discussion of all aspects of LDS tradition, thought, arts, and culture. For more information, go to dialoguejournal.com/podcast network. That's all one word, dialoguejournal.com/podcast network, and you can see the other podcasts that are part of our wonderful network. So you definitely want to check that out. In the early 1970s, BYU opened up a brand new law school, but there was a big problem. The American Bar Association threatened to withhold accreditation over race issues at BYU. We'll find out how the brand new president, Dallin Oaks, who's now a member of the First Presidency, dealt with that problem when he was the brand new president of BYU in 1971. Check out our conversation with Dr. Matt Harris, and we'll learn more about this potentially fatal blow to the law school.
You'd mentioned the law school, that another part of this is the law school, that the Reuben Clark Law School is they created it, and it's of course named after the beloved legal scholar Reuben Clark, who was a very influential member of the First Presidency, served with 3 presidents. And anyway, his protege, Marion Romney, Elder Romney, was in, I guess he was in the First Presidency at the time, right? Not quite yet. He was still an apostle. And then, of course, when President Kimball became the president, he called in Elder Romney. But anyway, Elder Romney was the one that was among the people really pushing to have the law school named after his mentor, Reuben Clark. So they start recruiting the law faculty. There's a number of legal minds who are Latter-day Saints that are scattered about the country at various legal institutions, including 2 of President Kimball's own sons, one of whom is active and one of whom is not. That's an interesting story. And both fine legal scholars. Anyway, so they built
Edward Kimball was one of those.
Edward Kimball would be one of them, and then his older brother, Spence Levan. They just called him Levan to differentiate him from his father.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so Levan was not active in the church.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I told Ed Kimball once, I said, I read your dad's journal, and they said, what did I say? Your dad said Levan was the smart one of the lawyers in the family. And Ed had a great sense of humor. He said, oh yeah, we all knew that. That was really funny. But anyway, Levan was one of the nation's leading legal scholars, I think in insurance law. And anyway, he was at Wisconsin. He was at the University of Chicago, which was a top 5 law school. And they wanted him at BYU, but he wasn't active. Anyway, and he wasn't going to come anyway. He wasn't interested in coming to Provo. But nonetheless, there's new law school popping up, and the American Bar Association, they send a letter to Dallin H. Oaks, this brand new president. He's a young man. He's just left his tenured position at the University of Chicago, where he went to school and then subsequently joined their law faculty. And BYU recruited him to replace Wilkinson. So in 1971, Dallin Oaks comes on board, and Oaks receives this letter. Oh my gosh, they're not going to accredit us. They're threatening to not accredit us because of the church's policy towards blacks.
On the law school?
On the law school.
Okay.
And they just got it up and running.
So let me make sure. So
yeah.
68, 69, we're having these civil rights problems with the entire school in general.
Yes.
We hire some black faculty, so that gets them off their back.
Yes.
But now 1971 comes, and the Bar Association's threatening to take away the accreditation.
And a year earlier, Nixon and the IRS with Bob Jones is out.
Okay.
This is all going on at the same time.
Wow.
And by the way, somebody speculates on the internet that BYU received the letter from the Nixon administration, the IRS, and there's no evidence for that. Because BYU had already been investigated by this civil rights team. So the IRS, as far as I know, didn't go after BYU. But anyway, the American Bar Association is not the IRS, nor are they the Justice Department. So they can do whatever they want to do, right? So BYU is getting it from all angles. And so the most important agency for any lawyer is the American Bar Association. And they've spent tons of money and man hours recruiting faculty and building the curriculum and building the building and all that. And all of a sudden, oh yeah, we might not accredit you. So needless to say, President Oaks is he's incensed, he's upset. And apparently this is a well-kept secret because Ed Kimball didn't know much about this. and he was on the faculty back in those days.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But anyway, there was a handful of people that were in President Oaks's inner circle that were, Bruce Hafen was one of them, and a couple of others, come to me in a minute, who were working with the Bar Association to overcome this. And they do back off. The Bar Association backs off. And now Elder Oaks gave a talk to the Reuben Clark Law Society 4 or 5 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. And in this talk, he just let out this sort of, kind of sly comment that I think a lot of people didn't understand the context to. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but he said, this is a published talk of his to the Law Society 5 or 6 years ago. He said, and we're grateful that the Bar Association accredited us despite the restriction on the priesthood. I mean, there was no context to that.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, I had the context by that point, and so I saw that, and I thought, oh, wow. And so I shared that with a few people who taught at the law school, and they just didn't know any of the context that they were in jeopardy. But I guess the upshot of all of this is there was a legal climate in the air in the late 60s, early 70s, where the Justice Department, the IRS, they were targeting institutions that they thought had unfair discriminatory policies. And President Oaks, arguably one of the reasons why BYU's historically had lawyers as presidents is because of these legal entanglements with church and state issues. And of course, BYU, being a private religious institution, is at the forefront of these First Amendment issues, more so than, say, my university, which is a public institution. But President Oaks was writing memos and speaking before Congress all throughout the 70s, trying to let them know, look, you guys stay in your lane, government, and we'll stay in our lane. You don't cross over into our lane. Let us practice our religion. And if that means, this restriction on the priesthood, then that's how it has to be. If it means not hiring women faculty, it's another issue with Title IX, then that's how it has to be. And so President Oaks was really making those legal arguments quite a bit in the 1970s. And I would imagine that the legal team today is making similar arguments with gay issues.
Yeah, I would think so.
Because these are not resolved issues. And the government has left, in my opinion, the government's left private religious schools alone for a while, or at least leaving alone that they haven't bothered to, go after BYU for, its policies towards gay students. But, like you pointed out earlier, the athletic conferences,
well, and
they do what they do.
There was an issue a few years ago with the Big 12 conference, and from what I understand, I know Texas really wanted BYU in the Big 12. But then when Baylor had their little sexual assault, rape issues, and then BYU had these gay issues, they just said, no, we can't do this, and that's why BYU didn't get invited. I thought it was the Sunday play thing, but it sounds like it was more of a gay the gay issue.
That's what I read too. It was against the values of their the values of their conference.
And I believe Iowa State had another student protest too. So.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how these stories are analogous, from the racial protests of the late 60s, early 70s to what you see some of it now. I mean, it's discrimination, right? And it's that classic delicate balance between practicing your religion and keeping the government away from what you think is sacred territory. It's the same thing that happened with polygamy in the late 19th century.
Right.
So BYU, I can imagine their legal team keeps pretty busy.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Matt Harris. In our next conversation, we'll talk about how President Kimball felt about the race ban.
President Kimball said in 1975, let me get this right, in 1975, if I don't lift the ban, my successor won't do it, nor will my successor's successor. And of course, he's talking about Benson and Mark Peterson.
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please support Gospel Tangents and become a subscriber. For just $5 a month, go to patreon.com/gospeltangents and you can hear the entire interview. And you can also get transcripts available at either our Amazon website, or if you want to give the money to me and not Amazon, please subscribe on my website at gospeltangents.com and you can click the yellow subscribe button. Of course, we're also on Facebook, Twitter, and all the other places. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents. And don't forget to click here to subscribe on YouTube, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some more of our great videos. Thanks again for listening.